call the meeting to order, please. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. This week, every town department will present and explain the budget requests for the 2019 and 2020 years to the Board of Finance. Every year is difficult, but this year has some special circumstances. A decrease in the ECS grant, a likely increase in teacher pension costs, large expenses faced by our town in emergency communications, fire truck, center school furnace, town hall construction, proposed lake treatment, and $54 million school reconstruction. These factors will need consideration when deciding on the final budget. Our goals are to preserve services such as schools, libraries, town hall, fire and police, maintain buildings and roads, and provide a safe and affordable town to live in. We want to moderate tax increases so they don't fluctuate wildly from year to year, and to continue to follow our 5-year capital plan in doing so. The superintendent's education budget shows about $265,000 in savings in 5 programs, allowing those funds to be spent in other parts of his budget. Very good. The STARS program continues to be a remarkable success. The recent teacher contract was a very good collaboration between the union and the town. It starts to address salaries that are among the highest in the state. It was a job well done. It is only a start, as we will need to continue to negotiate salaries that become more reasonable for a town of our size and ability. When we ask about line items, we are not criticizing. We have no ability to say where the school administration spends budget money. But we do need to see where this year's budget differs from last year's and how educational goals can be met with financial realities. This, by the way, is why the town charter requires the Board of Education budget to go through the Board of Finance and Town Council before taxpayers vote on it as a part of the complete financial picture. I hope that's understood by those who criticize us for doing what we were expected and elected to do. Next is public remarks, but before we begin, I'd like to say that I'm going to require that parents refrain from using your minor children as political props this year. This can be seen as abusive, and in the interest of your children, I cannot allow it. The CCM legal reps agree with me on this decision. We'll open it for public remarks now. Please limit it to about 3 minutes. That would be appreciated so everyone can have a chance to voice their opinions. Thank you. Go ahead, Mark.
Mark Hammer, 20 Brookside Court. My statement is very simple. I would encourage the Board of Finance to add a second public remarks section so that it would allow the public that is attending to comment after the presentation. I think that would be more beneficial for the members of this town to decide to attend. Thank you.
Any other public remarks at this time?
I'm Kobe, actually live on Clark Hill Road. Pretty much when I looked at all the budget, everything was pretty good. I'm not in town a lot because I live in Arizona and I travel with my job. But the one thing that I have, and I see it when we had the elections, when I was here to vote on the budget, you asked whether it was too high, too low, or just right. I think the education budget's a little out of control because it looks like it's a use it or lose it type budget. And when you look at the budget, they're hiring teachers and stuff that they didn't have. 70% of the tax dollars go into education. Clark Hill Road looks like a bomb's going off on it. I mean, we haven't fixed the roads. I've heard for years since I've been in town, the lake, the schools, the schools, the schools. We needed a town hall many years ago. It's kind of iffy if the town doesn't support the town hall completely. It's a 50-50. It didn't pass by much. So we got to do something about the education budget. It's just a little too high. It's just almost as much as some of the town budgets around us. Their whole town budget. It's just a little bit too high.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Hamstone, 17 Prairie Lane. We don't want a repeat of multiple referendums as it occurred last year. We're going down the path of having multiple referendums. It's a mailing by the Board of Finance with dollar signs next to a line item, with no explanation that 2/3 of a budget for any town goes towards education, or that the budget allocation in 2010 is the same as it was in 2019, or that the amount East Hampton spends per student is equivalent to Portland, Colchester, and even that East Hampton, in our district, which is Group D, spends even more per student. This is how you don't pass a budget. This is how you cause a rift between the town and education budget. You're on a journey for a no-no vote. Based on the Board of Education's final budget presentation, I know I'm getting ahead of ourselves, and to Mark's point, I think having secondary comments would be beneficial. I'm in favor to preserve the current resources and programming that are in the Board of Education budget as it is. Last year, the Board of Finance realized its mistake and proposed including additional funding for teaching resources based on the multiple referendum journey that we occurred last year. Residents want a quality education, but residents also want a solid town, and we deserve those types of services. But we also need to be shown the value of what is of how we're spending our money. And when you provide that value, residents are willing to pay. So I just ask that you take into serious consideration what's happened last year and this year, and also during the superintendent's presentation, take into consideration what has been done to adjust for this year's budget. There are no additional teaching resources being included in this year's budget, none. In fact, there's some reallocation due to the resources that were lost. Thank you.
Are there any other remarks at this time? Oh, yes.
Julie Bolas, 18 Fernwood Road. I'm here tonight to voice my support for the education budget. Like many others, I was disheartened to receive the mailing from your board last week. The mailing set a negative tone to this process. My oldest daughter is in the first grade, and I have a son who will be entering kindergarten next year. Over the past year and a half, I have had the privilege of volunteering in Memorial School. I have gotten to know some of the best teachers and administrators. These individuals work tirelessly with limited resources and large classes, devoting their entire beings to our children and the future of East Hampton. Please support the budget. It is not padded or inflated. And if you think differently, I urge you to spend time volunteering in the schools. Pay attention to the large class sizes and limited supplies. Get to know the amazing teachers. Watch them multitask and perform miracles. In my opinion, these teachers cannot do their job with less resources, and I do not want to imagine what our schools would look like without these talented and devoted individuals. The schools need our support.
Thank you. Any other remarks at this time? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, Bob Hine, 19 Birchwood Road. The budget for the educational side is always much higher than the rest because of the education. The schools requires a lot of manpower, maybe I should say people numbers. It just from a mathematical point of view, it's going to be approximately 2/3 of the budget. It uses about 2/3 of the workforce for the town. Every year we seem to get into this battle about whether we're spending too much money on education, and it's hard to argue that we are spending too much money. I'm sure we could cut a few dollars here and there, buy a couple reams less of paper, a few less baseballs, maybe not as many basketballs, knock off a bus or something. We could probably eliminate a couple bucks, but that can be said about any organization. There's always something you get rid of. My point is that we're probably spending an appropriate amount on education. People may differ over some specifics in the line items, but the bottom line overall seems appropriate. The mailing that went out highlighting the fact that the Education side was 69% or whatever it was, I don't remember the exact percent. It seemed to be like you were trying to highlight the education portion at the expense of the education budget. It was like highlighting, see where it's all going, see. That's the way most people seem to look at it as, it was perfectly legal, it's okay to point out, we can't argue about that. And I'm glad you didn't bring your daughter, have her speak, we wouldn't want to see what rules. So I'm going to say, I hope you do support the budget, all on both sides, education and the town budget side. A lot of input in it. There may still be some changes made, but overall, I think we've got a good solid budget and it's worth support.
Any other questions or comments at this time? Go ahead, please.
Darlene Brooks, 22 Chestnut Hill. Our town always fights over the expenses. I have never once seen where our income comes from. The income from the town. Most towns, it's the property taxes. But I know multiple towns also have investments that they take out of their general fund, so they have other kinds of income besides the tax base. Where does ours come from? Can we start talking about income, and can we start talking about our schools as an asset? Our roads need to be an asset, but in order for the roads to be an asset, you need the income. Where is it coming from?
We will address that tonight. Revenue is part of the town presentation. Thank you, though. Okay. Moving on. Mark, we cannot add anything to an agenda of a special meeting tonight.
Then my comment was directed to the future.
All right.
When there's a presentation, have something afterwards.
Well noted. Thank you. Okay. Mike, why don't you start with the presentation from the town's budget, please?
Great. All right, so we're going to see if we can make this thing work here. So, there we go. All right, this is the overall budget, and first couple slides that we're going to talk about are kind of the big picture of the town's budget, which includes education, it includes capital, debt, transfers, general government, everything. So this is the big picture, and this is kind of the process. So you can see the green line item there, those are the requests that come from all the department heads to myself, or in the case of education, since they changed the charter, it now goes directly to the Board of Finance. So you can see those are my changes in the orange, and then the blue line there is the actual dollar amounts that we have that we're forwarding on for the Board of Finance. There's another way to kind of look at it. This is the overall picture, at least in a pie chart. Pretty straightforward. 23% is town operations, 7% debt, capital and transfers 3%, and then 67% is education. And this is just kind of looking back. You know, it's always good to take a look forward to where we are today and then take a look back where we were. So a 10-year look back, you can see education was 67.4%, and then forward to today it's 66.8%. General government, town operations, 24.6% today. It's 23.6%. And then you can see that our debt, capitals, and transfers has actually increased a little bit. So that you can kind of see how the balancing act is going there. And now when we talk about the increase in the overall total budget, what we're looking at right now, you could see the drivers there. So transfers to other funds, education, and town operations. Debt service, we're keeping it pretty much about where we are today. So yeah, catch up myself. Let's talk about internally on the general government side of the budget, our actual expenditures. So salaries, full-time, those are all related to contracts negotiated with collective bargaining units. We really don't have a whole lot of say in how that works. Overall, those contracts, for the most part, they're negotiated about a 2% on average for salary increases. Part-time increases, that's a pretty big conversation that occurred last year during the budget. I think the Board of Finance remembers we talked a lot about the library salaries for a lot of the part-time employees in the library. They got a little bit of a bump. This is the other second half of that bump because the conversation essentially said that we couldn't do the whole thing right now. So we have had some difficulties hiring staff in the library part-time and keeping them because other libraries are poaching them and actually paying significantly more than we do. This year, unlike previous years, in the budget policy statement from the council, they said that they would accept requests for new staff as long as we could back them up with information or reasons why. So in this year's budget, we're asking for 2 new staff. One is a police officer. Pretty regularly, we're running with 2 officers, and I know the chief is going to go back there and hold his head. Personally, if you see what happens during a shift with 2 officers on, it's not safe. I'll be very frank. To have an individual dealing with maybe a medical call because they're the R1 responders, so they go to every single medical call first, and then have to deal with a domestic violence situation or some other type of dangerous situation. And what happens when that 3rd phone call comes in? Or what if we happen to have somebody arrested downstairs? We can't leave them alone. So now we're really down to 1 officer for all 37.8 square miles of our community. I don't think it's fair to the officers to put them in that situation, and I don't think it's fair to anybody else in this room to put them in that situation. So we need to really seriously consider stepping up our game in terms of our staffing in the police department. This is only a mid-year hire because it will probably take us a significant amount of time to get a police officer on the force. It's a lot of work to get them through the training processes and get them in the staff. But with a mid-year hire, that would probably put them into their school for around January, and then they would probably be in the force 6 months after that as a training officer, and then a couple months after that actually working for the town. Additionally, I think it's important to note with our police department, we are looking at the possibility of other retirements as well. So a number of our officers are very long-term, they've been on the force for a long time, they could leave at any time. That puts us into another situation where we're going to have additional staffing issues. So this position does a couple things in that regard. Also, we're looking for a building maintainer. Currently, we do not have a staff person to take care of the current town hall. The current town hall is essentially cleaned by a contractual company. We received some quotes for what that would cost in the new town hall, and it's a lot cheaper to go with an actual hired person for the future. So that's what we're proposing for the new building as well. As you can see, medical benefits, currently we're estimating about 8%. A couple years ago, the town and the Board of Ed went to the Connecticut Partnership Plan. We saw a 5% reduction across the board to actually do that. This year, right now, what we're looking at is about an 8% increase in our health insurance costs. Pensions, for a number of years, we've been really trying to stave off our pension plan. I think you've all heard about the challenges with pensions, like Detroit and others, very large cities. The town council a number of years ago stepped up and said, no more with the pension. We want to move away from that. So we've actually been moving to a defined contribution. That's your typical 401k if you're in the private sector, 401a if you're in the public sector type plan. And little by little, we're starting to close down our defined benefit plan. That said, as less people are paying into that plan, it's going to require a little bit more money from the town to actually keep the plan afloat. We do have an obligation for people who have retired on that plan, who are still, or for the people who are still paying into it. So, lastly, workers' compensation liability insurance, estimated to go up about 5%. The total of all of those is $445,156. So this is an interesting slide. I took some time to actually look at this slide, and this is our percent increase year over year for the last 10 years for general government. And I think you can see there's some dips and valleys as it goes. And one thing I want you to notice is where are the valleys and where are the spikes. So every time you see a valley, the next year after it, you see a spike. Last year, we came in with a 1.11% budget increase for general government. There are a number of things that we did that we delayed, we held off, we didn't do, we scrimped and saved and tried and did everything we could. It catches up after a while. So, as you can see, this year we're coming in with a 4.22% increase as a result. So, and if you look historically, year over year over year, it's the same exact thing that's happened. So it's nothing different, it's not a surprise, it's something that's gonna happen. Let's talk about staffing. In 2010, the town had 68.5 FTEs, full-time equivalents. That was the number of employees we had in the town to do the day-to-day work. I say every year here, when I come to this meeting, I tell everybody we are a person-driven organization. We have people doing jobs that computers can't. You can't have a robot out there policing the streets. It takes people to do these types of jobs. So really, we rely a lot on those individuals. You could see as a result of the recession in 2008, that staffing went down significantly, down to 2015 when we had 61.5 FTEs. With our proposal, we're getting back up to 65.5. All right, this is just about our the proposed changes in our general operating budget. As you can see, like I said, we are a person-centered operation. We have a lot of employees that's what drives the salaries and wages. And then right behind that is employee benefits. So let's go on to our next one. Capital improvement plan. This is the things like our roads, like our playgrounds, like our park, some of our rolling stock. This year's capital improvement plan requires about $1.2 million, a little over $1.2 million contribution from the general fund to actually fund it. That includes paving of roads and a multitude of other projects. We went a little too far, wait a minute. Oh, I actually skipped a slide, I'm sorry. So this slide, I jumped ahead. This slide is actually about our debt, our current debt that we have. This shows the high school debt as well as previous debt from fire trucks and road projects and some other things. And then you could kind of see the breakdown at the bottom there. And that does not include the town hall police department debt yet. This is the capital improvement plan. As I said, it increased by 1.2 million. And now we're going to talk about revenue, as you asked earlier. It's a big piece of what we talk about, and it's an important piece of what we talk about. Unfortunately, the state of the state is pretty bad. I think we've seen, the governor's calling for reductions in ECS funding of about 263,000 in ECS funding. There's some other smaller reductions in other grants that we received from the state. So there's a total reduction of 278,000. Also, our delinquent tax collection. Every year we go out, we try to collect. I think we budget for about a 98.5%, something around there, collection rate, which is not too bad. But when we're talking big dollar amounts, it does turn out to be fairly significant. So last year we did our tax sale, so there's not a whole lot of money left out there to actually collect that is delinquent. So that's also challenging us. All right. And this is a slide we talk about every year. And it's about our grants and our revenue that is coming in from the state. The one thing I think that's important to recognize is, as those grants, you can see they're headed down on the opposite side, unfortunately. Who's making up the difference? Each and every one of us here. So our property taxes are going up. And as you can see, I know somebody mentioned earlier about interest off of investments. That's in that all other category. So interest from investments, we're expecting this year to be 0.3%. So it's really skipping along the bottom of everything. All right. Now let's talk about our grand list. That's the value of our property and how that impacts the revenue that we're able to generate. So our grand list grew this last year by approximately 1%. The majority of that was due to economic development activities that we undertook in a multitude of different areas that are now coming online. So that's really good news for all of us. It also has to do with some of the values of our homes going up. But as you can see, like in previous years, as you can see in the line chart there, we're really skipping along the bottom in terms of grain list growth. I know some of the members of the Board of Finance might remember back a long time ago, they used to just wait to hear what that grain list growth number was, and that would cover the whole budget increase. But that's a different world now. So this slide is this is an interesting slide, because I know everybody says, well, how do we come up with a mill rate? What does that mean? And what does that number actually do? This is how we actually formulate the mill rate. So we start with our total expenditures, which is $47,301,187. We then back out our revenues before taxes. So those are the state grants, the interest from invested income. It could be other revenues from licenses and fees. So we back out those, which is $8,725,229. And as a result, we end up with the number of $38,575,958 for taxes needed. So that's the amount of money we need to make up in revenue from all of us. We know the value of a mill comes out to a little over $1 million, so it comes out to $1.1 million, which is divided into that $38 million number, and we come out with 33.62 mills. All right. And I think the big number everybody talks about is what kind of an increase in our mill rate is this going to be, because that's what we always focus on, that's what's debated often. So right now what we're looking at with the whole picture of what general government is looking for, with what education is looking for, we're currently looking at 1.86 mills. You could see the education portion of the budget accounts for 0.827 mills. Town operations accounts for 0.4 mills. Capital and transfers accounts for 0.4 mills. But then also look on the other side. You can see it's divided in two parts on that chart. That's the revenue-related mill decreases or increases. So first of all, in terms of the grand list, that actually decreases that increase in the mill rate by 0.37 mills. And then lastly, our loss in state funding adds 0.59 mills. All right, now I don't know if we can do this or not, Paul, but we're going to try and get this right on. So one thing we're trying to do as much as we possibly can for all of you this year, because I've heard a number of times over and over again, people have said, I don't know what's in the budget, what does it mean, how does it work, where do I find information? Our job is to try to be as transparent for all of you as possible and give you as much information as possible. As a result, on our town website, we've actually got a budget dashboard for you to take a look at. There's all kinds of things you can do with it and ways you can move it around, manipulate the numbers, say I want to get rid of this department, like the town manager's department, you could throw that out and you'll see how that impacts the budget. And then if you head down here, you could different ways of organizing it, and you can see the different ways that the budget changes as a result.
Mike, I'll just add, if you go back to that second page, if you click on, you can drill into the salaries and wages, so those are groups. So if you just want to hover over salaries and wages, that's I believe 4 or 5 years of, it'll give you the actual that we had in that account, the proposed budget. And if you click on it, I can kind of click on that, you can drill a little bit further and see that there's full-time salaries, overtime, part-time salaries, and then you can go back, there's an arrow right up in the top left, and you can kind of go back. So you can drill into a little bit more detail or drill out. You can select a variety of departments. If you hold down control, you can select public safety and culture and recreation, or if you just want to click on or select culture and recreation, you can select culture and recreation and drill into their numbers in a little bit more detail and get some history behind that number. And then the third slide is the slide of all of our salaries. The two charts on the right are static. So what we showed you was we have four groups. We have we have 3 bargaining groups, and then we have unaffiliated, which is the managers. So what we did show you is the average salaries and the total salaries by group. But then on that left-hand side, you could select on any one of those functional areas and get a listing of their title, their employee number, and their current salary. And that gets updated anytime we make a salary change. So if we made a salary change to someone's salary tonight or tomorrow, that will refresh and it'll be the current salaries.
So lots of good information for all of you to dig around, take a look at, make sure you're making informed decisions. I think it's important, especially since we all have the responsibility to make an informed decision and vote on our budget. I think it's important that we all understand and know that information.
And if there's something that you don't see that you'd like to see, I'll put my email out there. You can email me and ask me to see if I can create a different visualization. Or if you'd like something else, please send me an email.
And then lastly, I would say it's really important to be involved. And I've come to these meetings before and given this presentation to a room full of 7 people. And there's other times I've come here and it's a great turnout like this. So I think it's important to be involved. I think it's important to be informed. And don't forget, there's a lot of important dates coming up. So thank you very much.
Mike, I believe tomorrow's meeting has been changed to 4 o'clock rather than 6 o'clock.
It says 4.
It says 4.
It says 4. 4 to 6.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's all right.
Apologize.
That's all right. That's all we got today.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike.
You're very welcome.
Mike, where's our 10 years past, 10 years forward? The mill rate projection.
If you don't have a copy of the handout that says March updates, I'd encourage you to grab one. We'll bring one to you, only because I'm going to refer to some of the information in this document that's not on the PowerPoint. Does anybody need one? Did you just send this back? Anybody else need one with a March update? Yep. There you go.
Mike, do they have that?
Well, good evening. I know you have a very busy week ahead of you, so I won't take a lot of time. I know a lot of you have sat through our January and February presentations as the board went through this, but I did want to give you some March updates. And Dr. Brown, I really appreciate the statement that you said, and I'm kind of paraphrasing it, goals, or particularly for us, educational goals in consideration of financial challenges. And I think with our budget this year, that's what we really tried to do. Like it was mentioned, we're not asking for new staff. I'm taking it upon myself to realign staff. And at the same time, try to move us forward. And I think everybody in this room, we share the exact same concerns. The state is letting us down. And I don't mean that we are oblivious to everything that's going on in the state. But all of us are trying to honor the taxpayers. And the Board of Education has the dual role of honoring the children in this community. And I think that's what we tried to do with this budget. If you look at the second page in the handout, the complication we had this year when we presented the budget in January, we were at a 2.5% increase. when the governor's budget came out, if you look at the yellow highlight on page 2 up in the right-hand corner, the governor explained that he was looking for towns to contribute to the teachers' pension fund, which we all know the state has underfunded from the very beginning. The complication with that is we don't have any inclination of how the contribution is going to be assessed to the town. When documents came out early in January, it was listed in a negative number, and people said they would withhold for us the 151 from the ECS payments. Then we got other information that no, it would be an actual payment from the Board of Education. Because what we do is when we do the payroll for staff, we take 7% of their salary and send it to the state as part of their contribution for the pension fund. So nobody is giving us any indication right now whether it's going to be money that's withheld from the town or money that they're going to expect the Board of Education to pay. So after we did most of our budget workshop, the governor's budget comes out, and all of a sudden we're not sure how we're covering that 151,000. So the reason I've taken the time to kind of highlight these two is if we get word in 2-3 weeks that either this governor is going to go in a different direction, as seemed to be the theme with regionalization and other things like that, though I do want to have a conversation with everybody in this room about that in just a few minutes, then obviously we would not need the 151,000. But at this point, if that is going to be a payment that the town has to make, or particularly the school has to make, then what we've done is we've just tagged that on to the end of our budget. Believe me, in January, I was much more proud of this number up top than the additional 0.5% that's required as a result of the contribution. I explain that in the top paragraph on the bottom half of page 2. When you have time over coffee tomorrow, you can take a look at it. So this is the slide that I want to just spend a little bit of time on with you, because the third statement there, the Board of Ed with the teachers, they can negotiate salaries, they can negotiate days and hours worked, and health insurance, cost and coverage. The state pension program is non-negotiable. The teachers' state pension program is by legislature. So with every other one of our unions, we have moved them to the defined contribution. So none of our unions for employees coming in are their pensions any longer. We've moved every single one of our unions over to defined contribution. But with the teachers, that's not even a conversation we can have. I can't hire a new teacher and say, you're only going to get a defined contribution. The pension program is completely out of our hands. Now, a responsible thing for the state to be doing, like other states have done, would be kind of a 2-tier program. So new teachers coming in, maybe it takes a little longer, or you've got to be vested 10 years before. I don't even know what to suggest to them. But other states have gone with a 2-tiered program. Connecticut's holding on to a pension program that, if you look at the top bullet here, is underfunded 58%. They get the same issue with the state workers' pension. I understand there's a lot of complications here, but I use the word passing the buck on to towns. And that is literally what they are doing with the teachers' retirement. None of us in this room, as much as we would like to say, you know, let's do this with the pensions, the teacher pensions are out of our hand. Now, when the governor sits down with the state workers, he can negotiate their benefits. He can negotiate their retirement. But right now, by legislature, the teacher's pension program is as it is. So all we're getting to do, we're being handed the bill at this point. But I do want to stress that with our other unions, we have moved every single union for new employees coming in to the defined contribution program. What it does is, if you look at the bottom of this page, on the handout on page 3, towns that have worked to hire and keep quality teachers and are fiscally solvent get punished the most by the governor's contribution. And I'm not picking on any particular town, but there are towns with thousands of teachers and cities with thousands of teachers that are going to pay nothing towards the teacher retirement. So it's all based on a number of different factors. East Hampton does get hit hard because you're, in the eyes of the state, you're a solvent community. And it just gets worse. If this pension program goes through, and I urge you to contact, our state representatives, 151 is year one. It continues to grow until it maxes out at approximately 600,000 in the next 3 years. So this isn't just passing the buck onto this town. This is like a heavy lift onto the town over the next couple of years, without us having any control over teacher pensions or other aspects of what we offer our teachers. This is a huge lift. It's a huge lift for communities that are like us. I'm hoping that you will take the time tomorrow to contact our state reps and say it can't be on the back of communities. Now, I'm not necessarily a proponent of tolls or marijuana or anything like that. I'm just not a proponent of this. Something that I'd ask you to pay attention to is on the handout that I gave you. If you look at the yellow, East Hampton salaries are above the average wage in Connecticut, so you do end up paying more than communities that are below the average. However, there are about 50 towns in the state that are between the 80 to 89,000. So East Hampton is in pretty good company with those. But I also want you to look at the very bottom. I know Dr. Brown referenced this. We did make some very positive moves with our teacher negotiations. And I think people would love to see even more. However, negotiations with binding arbitration in the state, you move in increments with that. Otherwise, you lose an arbitration and you get nothing. In year one, we were able to get no step advancement and an additional step at the bottom. So it now takes teachers longer to get to the top. Because of the no step advancement, it will take all of the teachers, not just new teachers coming in, a little bit longer to get to the top. So all in all, I think the Board of Education did very well in negotiations this year. It was the second lowest settlement in the state. I have all of the settlements. I'd be glad to email those to you. As Mike did, and I don't know why it's saying the word value there, but you can look at it's showing up in the handout that I gave you. Like I said, we're asking for a 2.5 with that yellow box that says value is in there, 2.5% with what we're calling a contingency of an additional 151,000. I'm hoping by the time information comes around in April, we get a sense of the governor's budget, and we'll know if this is in or not in at that point. We'll also hopefully have a sense of, is this something that's being withheld from grant money to the town, or is this something that they're looking to have a check come from the Board of Ed? But I want you to know that we're doing some really important things to move forward and to keep costs down. We are shifting teachers around the district, around buildings, around the district to get the things that we need. We're offering new courses to meet the needs of our students. So even in tough times, we still need to move forward and meet the needs of our students. The state was talking about regionalization. Right now, I believe that we are a model for regionalization. And I'm going to go into details with you in just a minute on some of the regionalization efforts that we are making. We are not only regionalizing, but I think we're marketing ourselves for other communities to look at the programming that we have. I'll share that with you in just a minute as well. And obviously, we want to improve the quality of what we're offering to our students. This slide is not in your packet, but give me a minute to explain this for a minute. This is our East Hampton Learning Center. Right now, we have 6 students in the Learning Center. It's an alternative high school, and East Haddam buys 6 seats in. Those 6 students, if we did not have the Learning Center, we would have to outplace those students. All 6 of them would need an outplacement because they could not be in our high school. They meet in the golf house. It's a highly successful program, and East Haddam pays for half of it. So if you figure that's about half, we're paying the other half. If we were outplacing those 6 students, it would be a minimum of about $100,000 per student by the time you do transportation and their tuition. It's 50-50 with East Haddam. They can put 6 students in, we put 6 students in. They pay half the rent, they pay half the utilities, they pay half of the teacher's salary. There's 3 full-time employees who do that work. They do an excellent job. That's with East Haddam. Another program we have with East Haddam is we are actually providing the services to lead their food services. So our food services and our business manager, food services director and business manager oversee the East Haddam food program, and then we send them the bill for that. Right now we're charging them about $35,000 for that. And in addition, our STARS program, which is one of our newer programs, next year we anticipate bringing in about $163,000. What we're doing with this is I'm actually hiring a new BCBA, a Board Certified Behavior Analyst. For our program, it's not solely for the STARS program, it's more for our intervention program. This tuition is going to pay for that position, and the rest of that money we've already used to offset the budget for next year. This gives you a sense of, this is also not in your packet, but this gives you a sense of what we're trying to do. For example, if you look at this blue curve here as an increase in the numbers that we are serving in the district as opposed to sending out of the district. In the fall of 2008, our Learning Center opened and we started our ABA program. Right now, as this has moved from 2008 to now, we have 32 students in the program, and like I said, we have 6 students in the Learning Center of the 12 there. Of the 32 students, if we did not have that program intact right now, 13 of those students would need to be outplaced. So 13 of the 32, we could handle some of them in district, 13 of the 32 would have to be outplaced. I've already told you that 6 of these students we need to be outplaced. In the fall of 2017, we opened what we call the STARS program at the elementary school. We now have it in the elementary school and in the middle school as those children come through, and we have younger students in there. There's 11 students in the STARS program throughout the district. 9 of them would need to be outplaced if we did not have this program. So if you figure roughly $100,000 or more for outplacements between the 9 students, the 6 students, or the 13 students, we're doing a lot to keep our efforts to keep our costs down. And I know there was some confusion last year because I think as our special ed director was giving a presentation, he said, ultimately we should be able to save $300,000. And that wasn't money that we were going to get. That was money that we would need to find if we were outplacing students. So these are really cost avoidance efforts. You don't see the money. It's not like we get the cash back, except with, we do have, the reason there's an increase here is there are 2 students from out of district who are interested in our STARS program. In other words, our special ed director is selling the program to the area. If we're going to have the STARS program in each school, it makes sense to maximize. It's like running an airplane. You don't, if you fly an airplane at 50% full, you don't make money. So we want the STARS program not to be overcrowded, but we want, if we're hiring staff, we want to have the optimum number of students in there, and we can charge tuition for those students to be here. So we will end up getting about 2 students. That should be money that we make. In addition, the ABA program it's just good programming too. It's not that we're doing cheaper programming to keep people in. And Rod Mosier, our special ed director, will be glad to tell you stories. But we had a parent who, their child is in the ABA program. They thought they might like to look for alternative. A lot of parents look at outplacements and see if they can do it better. They came right back and said, we looked at a couple of places. You are doing it much better than some of the outplacements. And we had a CREC consultant come in, and they're starting to talk up the program to other towns because it's just such a strong program. So not only are we doing it cheaper than an outplacement, we're giving our students just a good education, which is the most important thing as well. I'm not going to take a lot of time on these slides. If you weren't here in January, for some of our presentations, there is a packet that doesn't say March updates. It has a little bit more of the return for investment information in it. But I just want to make sure that you understand when we are looking to move one of our music teachers up to full-time, all of the other positions here are through various realignments. We are looking to add some AP courses at the high school and forensics, but you can see those are not outlandish costs. At the middle school, we have some teachers that we're trying to add. The top two are funds that were forwarded from the town to us after referendum number 4 to hire 2 teachers, and these are the 2 teachers that we're planning to hire. These were positions that have been cut, and we are moving those faculty around. At the center school, the same thing. This is not another STEM coordinator. This is the same one. You notice it's 4 through 8. Center school covers 4 and 5. East Hampton Memorial School, we're restoring a special education teacher again. So all of those positions are being filled from within. We are not adding teaching staff for next year. And the board certified behavior analyst that we are adding, we're funding that by tuition that I showed you on the first page. Here's our expenditures. I know Mike showed you theirs in a bar graph. If you have any questions about this, you are welcome to take one of the thick documents here. It's also on our website. You can see the breakdown for each of these. Please call me or call Karen if you have any questions at any time. We'll be glad to walk you through the details of this budget. Or come Friday afternoon and hear the questions that the Board of Finance will ask us from 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock. I like to call the Friday afternoon session with them happy hour. But there's no cocktails or hors d'oeuvres here. The number of special ed students, like every district, continues to grow. And so if we don't have good internal programs, we're going to have more outplacements. So, one of the things that in the future with the Board of Finance I would love to do is in that education bracket, break down regular education costs, special education costs, perhaps transportation, how much facilities cost. Because I think people should know that, our children, some of our special education costs are high, but in comparison to other communities, they're pretty reasonable. But I think it'd be great for people to see what the breakdown is of the various categories there. This just shows you, and I know if you sat through my January presentation, we spent a long time on this slide, but this shows you as outplacements get more expensive like everything else, this just shows you that our cost of outplacements are actually going down. And enrollment, we're kind of scratching our heads a little bit. We've averaged about 140 students per class in kindergarten the last 4 or 5 years. This year we had a small kindergarten class of about 115. Not sure what to anticipate for next year, but given where the numbers are right now, and it's still relatively early in the process, it could be another class of about 115 or so. The NESDEC projections that we do every year, we pay for projections to be done. They predicted that we'd have about 115 students, but they were predicting it would happen 4 or 5 years ago. And we had 140, 140, 140, 140-ish. It dropped down to 115. So that may be where it is for a little while. We'll know more in a little while. Just to be safe, I have not budgeted, well, actually I should say, out of perhaps risky budgeting, I have not budgeted for an additional kindergarten teacher. So we have 6 teachers for 115 students, and next year we have 6 teachers. I did not budget for an additional teacher there. So I hope you take the time to go through our materials. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them at any point. I know you have a very busy week coming up, so I don't know if you have any questions now. I'd be glad to answer, but I know we're going to have a nice session together on Friday. Please come on Friday and hear the questions of our Board of Finance. And anytime along the budget season, if you have questions, please don't hesitate to ask.
Thank you for your presentations, gentlemen. Are there any questions by the board members? Is there any comments or questions at this time? Ron? No. Eric? All right, now. Jimmy? Yes? Okay. No other discussion at this time. I'll take a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Is there a second? Thank you very much. And we'll see you at 4 o'clock tomorrow. Thank you.